Everyone loves comparing special operations unit, who's better, who's tougher, who's more capable. But almost nobody asks a more important question. How do you build an elite special operations force from absolutely nothing? Because that's exactly what happened when the Marine Corps created MARSOC. And unless you understand how they were built, you'll never understand why they struggled in the beginning, or why they've earned the respect they have today. Today, we're talking about one of the most misunderstood organizations in special operations, the Marines' MARSOC Raiders. To understand why the Marine Raiders became one of the most respected reputations in all of the United States SOCOM today, we have to first answer a much bigger question. Why didn't the Marine Corps join Special Operations Command when everyone else did? So today we're going to be talking about one of the most misunderstood organizations in American special operations, the MARSOC Raiders, or MARSOC, which stands for Marine Special Operations Command Raiders. So if you've spent any time online, you probably heard one of two extremes, that MARSOC is a failure and has never measured up to the rest of SOCOM, or they're one of the greatest special operations units ever created. But like with most things, the truth is a bit more complicated than it seems. And the story of MARSOC is not necessarily a failure. It's a story when you try to build a new special operations force 20 to 50 years after everyone else. Now imagine being told to build an NFL franchise overnight, while every other team has spent already decades developing coaches, system, talent principles, cultures, and even championships. And that is essentially what MARSOC had to do. And to understand why they struggled early on, we have to understand why they didn't even exist in the first place. So when US SOCOM, or the United States Special Operations Command, was created in 1987, most of the major special operations forces were all brought under one command, which was the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs, the Rangers, the Air Force Special Operations elements, everybody except the Marines. But the reason the Marine Corps stayed out is important because the Marine Corps has always viewed itself as America's expeditionary crisis response force. The Marine Corps already believed that it was a highly capable forward-deployed expeditionary force. They were also worried that creating a special Marine special operations organization would pull some of the best people away from the Marine air-ground task forces. So for years, the Marine Corps resisted joining SOCOM. And then 9/11 happened. Afghanistan happened. Iraq happened. SOCOM's operational tempo just absolutely exploded. America needed more special operations capacity, more advisors, more reconnaissance, more direct action capability, more forces that could work by, with, and through other partner forces. But eventually the Marine Corps did agree to create its own dedicated Special Operations Command. And in 2006, MARSOC was officially stood up. But on day one, they were already behind. Not because Marines were not capable. Marines are some of the most disciplined and aggressive warfighters anywhere in the world. The problem was institutional experience. Army Special Forces had been conducting unconventional warfare since the 1950s. The SEAL team had decades of operational experience. The Special Operations Aviation already had decades of refinement. But MARSOC had none of that. No deep institutional history, no mature assessment pipeline, no Raider officials who had grown up inside the organization, no experienced Raider senior enlisted leaders who had already spent decades helping to build that culture. No doctrine had already been developed through generations of trial and error, unlike the other special operations organizations. They had no existing internal command pipeline. They had to build all of it while simultaneously deploying to combat in probably the height of the Jihad and the Iraq War. This was a massive challenge, and probably one of the biggest issues and the biggest reasons why MARSOC definitely struggled at the beginning was not because they tried to create some special operations direct action element. As a matter of fact, it's because they tried to copy and clone and emulate probably the most complicated of all the special operations unit already existing within the United States Special Operations organizations, the Green Berets.
Most people are one decision away from changing everything. I spent years at the tip of the spear as a Tier 1 operator, and the one thing that separated the men who made it from the ones who didn't had nothing to do with talent. It was fitness, and not just physical fitness. The discipline, the clarity, the mental edge that comes from being locked in physically. and that transfers to every single area of your life. For a limited time, I'm offering a 30-minute one-on-one fitness consultation and audit. We will get on a call and I'll break down exactly what you need to be doing going forward. And not a cookie cutter program, but a custom strategy built for you that you can implement immediately. 30 minutes, $49.99. And you will walk away with a plan from someone who has operated and lived this at the highest levels. If you are serious about leveling up, click the link.
Because Army Special Forces are probably the most complicated single special operations job in the entire U.S. military. Green Berets are not just direct action. They are unconventional warfare, foreign internal defense, or commonly known as FID. They do special reconnaissance, advising, training. They help to build partner forces. They operate behind enemy lines. They link up with local militias or even build their own resistance networks. They teach them how to fight, organizing, equipping them, supporting them, gathering intelligence, coordinating fighters, basically creating their own mini little armies behind enemy lines. And then they do all that, and when necessary, they also conduct direct action themselves. A Green Beret is designed to be self-sufficient because they're designed to do all this behind enemy lines without any sort of support. That's why an ODA is constructed the way that it is. They are designed to go into difficult environments, build relationships, create force multipliers, and even influence an entire battle space with just a very small team. That is why the Green Berets are so effective during the global war on terror. While many other units were primarily focused on direct action, special forces teams could do much, much more. They could help to build the intelligence picture. They could train the local forces. They could conduct foreign internal defense. They could work through indigenous partners. They can control an entire battle space. And with all that, they could still conduct direct action whenever they need it. That combination made them incredibly effective during this time. So it is not surprising that when MARSOC was finally created, the model that they looked at was the Army Special Forces, because at the time they were considered pound for pound probably the most effective special operations organization in all of SOCOM. But there is a major difference between copying a model and building the culture required to execute that model. The Green Berets have been doing this since the 1950s. MARSOC was brand new at the height of the GWOT, and now the Marine Corps was trying to create an unconventional warfare organization inside the branch that institutionally is probably the least naturally built for outside the box thinking. That's not an insult to the Marines. There are a lot of amazing things about the Marine Corps. The discipline, the aggression, the pride, the standardization, the ability to create tough, reliable warfighters. But special operations, especially unconventional warfare, requires a different mindset. Small teams, independent judgment, decentralized decision-making. You have to have comfort operating without constant guidance, working with and through foreign forces. You have to understand the local politics, tribal dynamics, the intelligence, the culture, and even understand the human networks. And that type of thinking is not something the conventional Marine Corps had historically emphasized at the same level as the Army, or especially the Army Special Forces. So MARSOC was trying to build one of the most complicated special operation mission sets in the entire world inside an institution that was already not naturally designed around that mission set. And that created fiction. And then you had the leadership problem because MARSOC was brand new. There were no experienced Raider officers who had already grown up inside of this organization. There were no Raider battalion commanders with 20 years of MARSOC experience. There were no Raider colonels who had started as a young Raider officer and grown up through the command. So who had to lead the organization? Normal line Marine officers. And many of those were outstanding officers. Many of them had combat experience. Many were capable leaders. But leading a conventional Marine unit and leading a new special operations organization are two very different things. So you had operators trying to adapt to probably the most difficult special operations lifestyle. You had leaders trying to understand how to command a special operations organization. And then you had the Marine Corps trying to understand how to even use MARSOC. And then you had SOCOM trying to figure out where MARSOC would even fit into the greater Special Operations Command picture. And this was all happening while the country was at war and arguably the height of the Iraq War. That is why the early years of MARSOC were so difficult. And then came the incident that shaped MARSOC's early reputation more than anything else. The Baquba Incident. So if we're going to talk about MARSOC, we really can't have a serious discussion about MARSOC's early history without talking about Afghanistan in 2007. Because in March of 2007, a Marine Special Operations Company was operating in Afghanistan when one of the convoys was attacked by a suicide vehicle-borne IED, or a VBID. So after the explosion, the Marines reported receiving small arms fires from multiple locations. They returned fire while trying to break contact and move through what they believed was a coordinated ambush. But soon after the engagement, allegations emerged that civilians had been killed. The Afghan government had already condemned the incident. International media picked it up immediately. It became a huge story. Political pressure came down fast. And for a brand new Special Operations Command just trying to prove itself, this was devastating. That Marine company was pulled from Afghanistan. Their commander was relieved. Their entire deployment became a controversy. For years, this incident shaped how people viewed MARSOC. I was actually in Iraq when this happened, and we all viewed that one of MARSOC's first mission, and they already got fired.
Strength isn't built in comfort. It's built through repetition, through discipline, through showing up when it would be easier not to. For me, training has always been about pushing limits, becoming stronger, faster, and more capable every single day. But the gear you wear matters. Barbell Apparel was built for athletes who move, who train, who refuse to compromise between performance and style. Clothes that move with you, built for strength, built for durability, and built for the grind. Whether it's the gym, the track, or the everyday mission, train hard, move freely, live disciplined. Barbell Apparel. Use code Stoic Viking 25 and step into gear that's built for you, how you actually train.
And at the time, because of the information that we had at the time, many assumed that the Marines had acted recklessly. But as later investigations would develop, the picture, like always, became more complicated. The initial versions of the event did not tell the whole story. Later investigations found that Marines had, in fact, been hit by a suicide bomber and had come under enemy fire. And then even some of the most serious accusations that dominated the early reporting at the time were then ultimately not even substantiated. The Marines were actually later cleared of criminal wrongdoing, because anytime a civilian has been harmed, it definitely deserves a real investigation. But the Baquba incident is also a reminder of something every military professional should truly understand. The first version of events in combat is almost never the final version. Whether we're talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, or any future conflict, initial reports are often incomplete. Information is almost always fragmented, especially at the beginning. Eyewitness accounts should always be taken with a grain of salt because they typically conflict with one another. Intelligence is still being collected at that point. Leaders are forced to make decisions in an environment where they rarely have the full picture or even all of the information yet. But unfortunately, this is the reality of war. And as more evidence is gathered, as forensic analysis is completed, and as intelligence reporting eventually matures, and as investigators interview everyone involved, our understanding of what actually happens often changes. And that is why it's important that professional militaries always conduct thorough investigations instead of just relying on the first headlines or the first reports coming out of the battlefield. And this is not just a lesson for professional militaries. This is a lesson for everybody, because even civilians, when dealing any type of media, this happens all the time. We deal with this on a day-to-day basis as just as civilians. But this does not mean incidents should not be investigated. They absolutely should. Professional organizations have a responsibility to investigate allegations thoroughly, especially when civilians may have been harmed. But it also means that we have to resist the temptation to rush to judgment before all the facts are known. And we talk about this every single day on this channel. Wait for the information to come out. Don't jump to conclusions. Intellectuals and good leaders understand that accountability and due process go hand in hand. They demand the truth wherever it leads, but they do not confuse speed with accuracy. The Baquba incident is a reminder that combat is chaotic. Information evolves, and history is often way more complicated than the first story that ever gets told. But for MARSOC, the damage was already done. Regardless of what later investigations concluded, the organization's first major combat deployment had become associated with controversy. So now MARSOC had another challenge. They were not just building a new special operations force, they also had to rebuild trust, credibility, and even confidence. And over time, that's exactly what they did. Afghanistan and Iraq became MARSOC's proving grounds, and every deployment taught lessons. Selection improved, training improved, mission planning improved, intelligence capabilities were improved, relationships across all of SOCOM were improved. Both leadership and operators would mature. The organization started to develop its own culture, and eventually MARSOC became more than just this new experiment. It became a real special operations command with its own identity. And that identity became even stronger when the Marine Corps restored the Raider name. The Marine Raiders of World War II gave the organization a historical connection. It gave it a legacy, a tradition, a name to rally around, and that matters. Elite organizations, especially in the military, need more than just skills. They need culture. They need identity. They need a shared history. They need a reason for people to believe that they are a part of something bigger than just themselves. And over time, MARSOC stopped just being the new guy in SOCOM. They matured, they adapted, they learned. And today, the Marine Raiders are a very different organization than the one they were in 2006 and 2007. And today, they have experienced senior enlisted leaders and experienced officers who have now grown up within the MARSOC organization, doing operations as Raiders. And the MARSOC Raiders have even taken a number of pages out of the other assessments of throughout the entire military and have built a more modern and mature assessment and selection process. They have created their own more mature training pipeline, and they've even better integrated with the broader special operations community. And now they've developed real combat experience, and they have institutional knowledge that simply just didn't exist in the beginning. And that is truly how elite organizations are actually built, because they're not built overnight and not because somebody just puts on a different patch. Elite organizations are built through time, experience, failures, adaptation, and continuous improvement, because there's no such thing as an organization that's not going to have failures along the way. The difference between an organization that's successful is what do they do when they encounter their failures? Do they adapt or do they fold? So when people talk about MARSOC's early struggles, they need to understand the context.
I spent years as a Tier 1 operator with ISA, and I had the privilege to work with some of the best conditioned human beings on the planet. I know what peak performance looks like, and I also know what it looks like when someone's running on empty and they're telling themselves that it's just stress. If you're watching this and your energy is down, your recovery is shot, and you feel like you're operating at half capacity, your testosterone is probably the reason. I know it was for me, because it's not your mindset, it's not your discipline, it's your biology. Human performance is veteran-owned and operated by other Tier 1 operators. They run blood work, they will build a protocol around you, and they actually know what they're doing because they've lived the same life as you. And I use them because I don't promote things I don't use. Because you're watching right now, you can get a discount of 20% off by using my discount code Viking. The link is below. Get the blood work done. If you're fine, then you'll know. If not, then you'll have a solution. Either way, you win. Discount code Viking. Do it today.
And the context is they were created late, and they were trying to copy one of the most complicated mission set, if not the most complicated mission set in all of special operations. And that organization of the Green Berets have been doing it since the 50s. They were trying to build that capacity inside a branch that historically has been conventional, standardized, and institutionally resistant to creating a separate special operations force culture. The Marines were not known for outside the box thinking when you were trying to create an organization that needed outside the box thinking. And then they had to staff that organizations with leaders who had not grown up inside of MARSOC itself, because no such leaders even existed yet. And to be honest, some of the leaders that they chose may have not been the right personalities to help usher in MARSOC. And then they had to deploy immediately. They had to learn in combat, on the fly. And one of the first major deployments became an international controversy. And that is a difficult birth for any organization. But the story does not end there. The story is not that MARSOC failed. The story is that MARSOC struggled. They learned, they matured, and they earned its place. And to me, that's the more important lesson. And every elite unit has its growing pains. Delta Force had its growing pains. Its first major operation was Operation Eagle Claw, which is one of the biggest failures in modern U.S. military history. But they adapted, they learned, they evolved. The Rangers evolved, SEAL Team 6 evolved, ISA evolved. MARSOC, unfortunately, had to do it later than everyone else. And while all the same time in the middle of the G1, fighting America's longest wars, and while that, the whole world was watching. So if we're going to tell the story of MARSOC honestly, we have to tell the whole story. The resistance, the late start, the Green Beret model, the cultural challenges, the leadership challenges, the Baquba Incident, the operational growing pains, and the maturing of an entire organization that helped them to become what they are today. The Marine Raiders are not defined only by their beginning. They are defined by how they have adapted after it, how they have taken the failures within their own organization and how they have used that to propel them into what they are today and what they will become eventually. And I think this is one of the greatest lessons that any of us can use in our life, because it's not our successes that will ultimately truly define us. It will be our failures, because that is where we learn the most from those failures. How do we respond to when we get knocked down? How do we get up? How do we learn our lessons? And how do we continue on making ourselves better, stronger, and continuing on to build our character and building these entire organizations? Because the MARSOC Raiders are not defined only by their beginning. They're defined by how they adapted to after it. And that is what makes their story worth telling. So I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I think the story of the MARSOC Raiders, of how they started in controversy, they were put in this extremely difficult situation, and then they have adapted, and they have in a lot of ways succeeded and come out of that fire. They've risen from the ashes, is a great lesson for people in general, and it's a great lesson for life. Is we are going to go through life, and we're not really going to be defined by our successes. We're really going to be defined by our failures, because that is where we learn the most. That's where we grow the most. And that's one of the reasons why it's really important to tell this story, because we like to tell the stories of any great American drama or any great American ism, whether it's the miracle from on the ice in Lake Placid with the U.S. men's hockey team winning the gold against Russia during the Cold War. You can draw so many different parallels, and this is such a great lesson that we can translate and use into our life, and it's a very American thing. And I'm very proud that MARSOC has taken the controversies and they have then developed into the organization that they've become today. And I look forward to seeing them probably become one of the best special operations organizations in all of SOCOM. So if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. By doing so, you truly help me in helping these videos to get to the people who want to hear them, but obviously also probably the people who even need to hear them. I appreciate all of you guys, and I'll talk to you later.